Clarence Thomas hinted he would quit, he'd resign if he didn't get more money. He wanted a pay raise or he would walk. Now what? Dummy. Gave the raise after that. My own commentary. Early January 2000, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was at a 5-star beach resort in Sea Island, Georgia. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Fancy vacation for someone so deep in debt. Thomas had grown frustrated with his financial situation, according to friends. He had recently started raising his young grandnephew, and Thomas's wife was soliciting advice on how to handle the new expenses. At the resort, Thomas gave a speech at an off-the-record conservative conference, found himself seated next to a Republican member of Congress on the flight home. Interesting. The two men talked, and the lawmaker left the conversation worried that Thomas might resign. Congress should give Supreme Court justices a pay raise, Thomas told him. If lawmakers didn't act, one or more justices will leave soon, maybe in the next year. At the time, Thomas's salary was $173,600, equivalent to over $300,000 today. But he was one of the least wealthy members of the court, and on multiple occasions in that period, he pushed for ways to make more money. In other private conversation, Thomas repeatedly talked about removing a ban on justices giving paid speeches, pro publica. With the factoids here, Thomas's efforts, including a confidential memo to Chief Justice William Rehnquist from a top judiciary official seeking guidance on what he termed a delicate matter. It's not clear if the Chief Justice at the time ever responded. Several months later, Rehnquist focused his annual year-end report on what he called the most pressing issues facing the judiciary, the need to increase judicial salaries. Most pressing issues facing the judiciary. Several people close to Thomas told ProPublica they believed that it was implausible the justice would ever retire early and that he may have exaggerated his concerns to bolster the case for a raise, you think? But around 2000, chatter that Thomas was dissatisfied about money circulated through conservative legal circles and on Capitol Hill. According to interviews with prominent attorneys, former members of Congress, and Thomas's friends, it was clear he was unhappy with his financial situation and his salary, one friend said. Former Senator Trent Lott, then the Republican Senate Majority Leader, recalled in a recent interview that there were serious concerns at the time that Clarence Thomas or other justices would leave. Long way from his Republican Party. Around that time, Thomas was also pushing to allow justices to make paid speeches, a source of income that had been banned in the 1980s. On several occasions, Thomas discussed lifting the ban with appellate judge David Hansen, who chaired the Judiciary's committee responsible for lobbying Congress on issues like pay, according to Meacham's memo. At Senator Mitch McConnell's request, a provision removing the ban for judges was quietly inserted into a spending bill in mid-2000. Why McConnell made the proposal became a subject of scrutiny in the legal press. After the Legal Times reported the measure had been dubbed the Keep Scalia on the Court bill, Scalia responded that the honorarium ban makes no difference to me and denied that he would ever leave the court for financial reasons. Ban was never lifted. McConnell did not respond to a request for comment. Congress never lifted the ban on speaking fees or gave the justices a major raise. But in the years that followed, a ProPublica report said Thomas accepted a stream of gifts from friends, acquaintances that appears to be unparalleled in the modern history of the Supreme Court. Some defrayed living expenses, large and small, private school tuition, vehicle batteries, tires, other gifts from ultra-rich men supplemented his lifestyle, such as free international vacations on the private jet and super yacht of Dallas real estate billionaire. You've heard the name before, Harlan Crow. It's all coming together, Senator. This is the same Clarence Thomas who believes that everyone can make it in America if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Perhaps he recognized being one of the only, perhaps then the only, on the high court. What's different about me? I didn't come from wealth. I wonder what's different about me? Maybe he asked his wife. I don't know. But this is a damning report. Where would Clarence Thomas go if he left the Supreme Court? Hadn't heard of him prior. Have you heard of him? Do you remember if you heard of him prior to when the senior Bush gave us the gift that keeps giving, Clarence Thomas? This is historical horrificness, and it's how we got here today.
It is, Sharon. It was against, I mind you, a Supreme Court justice did not want him to take his place. Thurgood Marshall did not want Clarence Thomas to take his place because he knew what kind of man he was. Sharon, I'm gonna take a little different take on this. I think this is one of the rare moments that we see Clarence Thomas being like everybody else. And that's a point that you had brought up, like everybody else, that he was reminded of who he was and what he really came from, which is working class people. The fact that Supreme Court justices, look, I'm not against the Supreme Court justices getting a raise. I do understand why there would be a ban on speaking engagements because it's much more easier to manipulate that in ways that would probably harm the integrity of the court, as if the integrity of that court is not harmed already. But hopefully our viewers know where I'm going with this. But Clarence Thomas did not come from a lot of wealth. And as much as he tries to make people forget, he's a black man in America. And oftentimes as black people in America, no matter what your status or stature is, you will be reminded of that. And then lastly, the man wasn't nobody, people just don't give up lifetime appointments, Sharon. I don't care how little it pays. You're not giving up a lifetime appointment. That's why he didn't go anywhere. But his argument, despite the fact that I do not agree with Justice Thomas, that Justice Thurgood Marshall was absolutely right. He was not the right person to replace somebody of Justice Thurgood Marshall's integrity and what he stood for in terms of the uplift of black people and civil rights. Thomas is the exact opposite. However, as grandma used to say, a broke clock can be right twice a day. The fact that he talked about, hey, maybe we need a raise, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And I'm glad it humanizes him in a way, Sharon, that I had seen or read in a long time.
Yeah, my grandmother used to also say, even a blind squirrel can find a nut once in a while, right?
Once in a while.
So yes. I think you're right. Do we want Supreme Court justices who are deciding our very lives and the future of our country, in many cases, setting this legal precedent, scrounging and scraping to pay off loans,
right,
to live as even comparable to their peers? Is that what we want, or do we want them being more Thurgood Marshall-like and not being able to be bought and paid for? Okay. Do you have any doubt, though, that Clarence Thomas was the one circulating these rumors and then perhaps tried to pin it on Scalia? Okay. That was Clarence Thomas. Or maybe Jenny. Maybe Jenny was texting again.
That was smooth, though.
That was real smooth because that was believable. That was believable, wasn't it? What should happen now? Because ProPublica has done, Senator, incredible reporting. They have, and they've uncovered a lot of things. And all I hear from fellow Americans, pundits, commentators, I don't really care. But it's everything, isn't it? Look where the court has taken us in just the last 2 years.
I know. And again, depending on who appoints these justices, that's the type of personalities we get. So this court is very much to the right, no doubt about it, because Trump had the opportunity to appoint several of them. But another message in this story, Sharon, is the class divide, in this country. And as much as I would never have thought that Justice Thomas would give us a searing example of the class divide in this country, he really is in him really lobbying to get a pay raise that he was not at that time among the ultra wealthy in this country. And we see that is skewed, that the more wealth that you have, the more opportunity to run for certain offices. Of course, you don't run to become Supreme Court justice. He was appointed. But again, another point about the class consciousness in every sphere of elected office. I'm stunned, Sharon, I really am.
Yeah, I think you're right to illustrate that point. I'll make one final point that It's interesting to me that as Clarence Thomas pled his case privately to the right ears about, hey, we don't make enough for all of this. I can't survive on all of this. That these same Republican lawmakers scrambled and tried to get something done to give Clarence Thomas hope. These are the same lawmakers who historically have said $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $20 an hour to give everyday Americans some hope who were at the end of their rope, who were ready to quit on the line. They were done. They had nowhere else to go. Okay. It wasn't about keeping up with the Joneses. It was about keeping food on the table. And oh, yeah, do I even have a table or a roof over my head? That part. I'll give you the last word, then we'll take a quick break.
No, you better preach. If the audience could see me, I'm like an amen. You better preach.
That part.
Sharon.
Yeah. It's interesting. We'll follow up with it. I've heard you on the first two stories. This is why we love her. Okay. Give excellent commentary, a history lesson,
Back
and even, give us some reference points for two people you may not agree with, but may, in this instance, relate to your circumstance.